Okay, so today is Friday, 6/14. I'm just coming off the heels of a Skyrim stream. I'm trying to get all 100% achievements on it. It's been awesome. Like, we've been streaming to TikTok, we've been streaming to Twitch, and then at the end of our streams, we raid it out to someone else, which is a Twitch term to say, hey, we're going to take our audience and we're going to bring it to someone else's stream. So I raided into another guy's stream, and he's playing Star Wars Hunters, and like they started talking about the Acolyte, and he immediately starts going off, and in a way that wasn't super great. It wasn't like outright homophobic like I've seen a lot on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. However, I posted in the chat, I was like, hey, I think the Acolyte is great in my opinion, and he responds with, that's great that you can just like whatever Star Wars content. Like, I wish I could be like that. I can't do that, which is super condescending. And, we were just griping that, like, man, these people who are mean have bigger audiences than we do.
Indeed.
Do we just need to be mean?
I mean, we could always just like berate each other. That could work.
Your hat's dumb, like the podcast.
Did you mean like the podcast, like click the like button, or your hat's dumb also like our podcast?
Oh gosh, I could see no. Two separate thoughts.
The English language is betraying us.
Not comma, like the podcast, period. Like and subscribe and follow the podcast, please.
I see what you're saying now.
Oh my gosh. We should get on topic.
Welcome everybody to the show. Happy Friday for those who are actually getting to see us on stream today. We really appreciate that. Last week we talked, actually, not even last week. We missed last week, and we apologize about that. We had a lot of stuff come up, and we're very thankful you guys are still listening, because sometimes life gets ahead of us and we lose track. So 2 weeks ago, we did a surface level brief on the Ultramarines as a chapter. Very, very surface level. Now we're going to be digging in a little bit more. We briefly talked about their history, the inspiration behind the design and operations, their Primarch, Robot Girly Man, and some of the events of Space Marine, the over-the-shoulder video game covering the exploits of Captain Titus. So today, we are going to be covering our deep dive on Captain Titus in preparation for the sequel to the game Space Marine 2, which comes out in September of this year, 2024.
It's Lieutenant Titus now.
We're gonna get there, brother.
Welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
We're twin brothers here to bring you what's new in nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects, in this case, Warhammer. Welcome to our cantina. Grab a drink and settle in as we set course for realities beyond our own.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 75. Today's recording date is Friday the 14th. Almost an unlucky day, but, that's all right. And this episode will be released on Monday, June, because all my dates are wrong, June 17th. Today, we're going to be discussing the Ultramarines, specifically Captain Titus, or Lieutenant Titus, as I have been so informed. And we might even talk about some nerddom news, but we will also cover our lightsaber giveaway, which is, yes, still going on. And you guys should make sure that you join and all that first stuff. So we're going to start off. Okay. Andrew's writing things in the teleprompter. So it's in the teleprompter, so I have to read it. First, let's begin with our starter questions. Rocky Mountain Oysters, read the prompter, you coward.
Thank you. I think I am so funny.
Please read our starter question for us, brother.
If you had to customize your own Space Marine chapter, what would you do?
I kind of went into... I got a little bit of tunnel vision when writing this at work. I ignored everything around me for 20 minutes and was just in the Warhammer zone. I don't know if you ever get that, but that's kind of how I went in with this.
I'm trying not to get into the Warhammer zone right now because I have my paints and stuff around me. My wet palette is out, and I'm like, but I have gaps to fill on my little weapons.
Yeah, please focus on the podcast, dude. That's why I record with my painting stuff behind me, because that way it's out of my hands, because there have been times where I try to paint stuff. You guys can't see this because I'm probably going to edit this where my face is in front, but I might even put Andrew's in front so you can see all the goofy shit he's doing.
You definitely
So
should.
If I had to go through, I would probably name my chapter something like The War Dogs, just for kicks and giggles, but I would really want my chapter to specialize in ranged engagements. I would prioritize ranged combat to beat my enemies down from a distance and prioritize shield lines in melee. Basically, my goals would be to hold the enemy at bay while my marksmen whittle them down. I think eliminating the opponent's ability to engage in melee combat would thwart quite a few foes. This chapter would have a heavy reliance on armor, tanks, artillery, and air support. All of those are going to be key. So again, just absolutely beating the absolute living daylights out of everybody from range. And then by the time they get there, they have no chance. As chapter master, I would want my enemies so thoroughly beaten down that like you can kind of just push them over at the end. And then of course I would have like, a shield wall with like Terminators and Thunder Hammers behind it. They're like, you think we're good at ranged? Wait until you get to melee. So, but just absolutely rock people's world. That's essentially what I would want to do.
That reminds me, excuse me. I'm so sorry. That reminds me of the Top Gear clip where Hammond is in the tank and he's like, I need everyone to know that I have an Also, please bleep that out.
No, I'm leaving it in there. It's not a swear word, so it's gonna stay in.
Yes, but I want to use it as a highlight on our Instagram and Facebook.
Fair.
Interestingly enough, I have had the opportunity to make my own color scheme for my own Space Marines. Being a Seattle native, I figured I would inject some hometown pride into my army and went with a blue-green color scheme modeled after our own Seahawks. Also known as an Osprey, I decided to go with kind of the boobs, and because I regularly gaslight myself into thinking I'm not creative, I went with Warbirds, which you went with War Dogs, which is also what I'm painting right here, a Chaos War Dog.
We're so original.
Again, yeah, I was not joking about the part about gaslighting myself. That's also why, or gosh, I lost my place. I'm happy with the name, although, and that's what matters. But in my own headcanon, these Marines also specialize in armored companies. I know, because we're twins, with tactical air support. I do have a couple Dark Angels flyers that I really like, and have been totally procrastinating on painting. That's why I also have a really cool proxy model on my army, which is a Mecha Tyrannosaurus Rex sitting in as a repulsor executioner, because a Tyrannosaurus Rex evolves into a chicken, which is a bird. It counts. Something bing, bang, boom. I have a dinosaur in my army, and I think that's pretty rad.
You're like, it's close enough. If you follow the evolutionary tree.
Actually...
I think that's really fun. I love your dinosaur models. You also have a Triceratops, which I think is super cool as well.
I do have a Triceratops, and then I also have an Astraeus tank.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it's huge.
So you can... how many points is an Astraeus tank?
It's like 600 points. It's huge.
So you couldn't even run that in a combat patrol?
No, you couldn't.
That's wild.
I'm so nervous to paint this. I'm so nervous.
Good thing you have an airbrush.
No, my airbrush is super clogged because I don't know how to take care of it, and I need a new one. To be fair, I paid about $25 for the airbrush I got, and if you pay for crap, you get crap.
That's why I don't pay for stuff. Andrew, I love your chapter. It's shocking. Absolutely nobody that our chapters are very, very similar in how they operate because we are twins. So big shock to everybody. Are you ready to get into our main discussion today?
Dude, let's talk about Titus.
Fantastic. So one thing first is I really enjoyed the questions you posed for writing out this script because I had a blast filling this in. So thank you for that. Big shout out to Andrew.
That literally was my only contribution.
He's downplaying himself. Anyways, and I have the editors. I'm the editor, so I get to decide what goes in the podcast. So don't fight me on this. So one of the first questions we wanted to answer was what happened to Titus before Space Marine 1? We got the pleasure of watching Andrew go through and stream all of this over on Twitch, and it's also over on YouTube as well. So if you guys haven't yet, this is just a little mini plug. Please go check out our YouTube channel. Make sure to like those videos, comment with like what you guys want to see more, and subscribe. We're super close to 500. That would help us a ton. But we're going to focus on Captain, also Lieutenant Titus. So before the events of Space Marine 1, Demetria Titus was born on an agri-world called Torrentus in the realm of Ultramar. Now, we're going to try to fill in as many different details as possible. So if you are not familiar with 40K as a setting, we're going to try to explain things as we go. So for example, if you just heard me say a lot of like weird sounding words, we're going to break those down. So a lot of times you'll get names in the Warhammer universe like Demetrius, right? Or Demetria, which is kind of like the more Latin, or in this case, High Gothic version of that name. So basically, like the writers take a lot of different things and they just change the vowel placement usually to make them reflect this style of writing. So that also means that they use a lot of different portmanteaus of different words as well. So for example, an agri-world is just a portmanteau of agricultural and world. Keep in mind, the reason we do this is because the Imperium is so massive, it needs to make efficient use of its resources in space. Currently,
including its character count, apparently.
Yes. Currently on Earth, like we tend to split our areas of land up into different uses for agricultural, manufacturing, even city space. We don't really think of like the land being set aside for cities, but the Imperium does this with entire planets. So if they need a hive world, which is like a city planet, think Coruscant from Star Wars, they're going to do that. If they need to feed millions of people throughout a sector, they're not going to focus on like carving out small pieces of land for agriculture. They're going to terraform an entire world so they can basically get 100% perfect production out of that world to feed as many people as possible. It's just more efficient that way because then they can just ship the food to somewhere else. This makes the most amount of sense when you look at how the Imperium manufactures things. The Imperium of Man does not give two shits about the environment.
No, it doesn't.
When they are making things like tanks and titans and things like that, they have foundries and factories that literally span the entire world. They're forge worlds. Like you guys have probably heard that term before. That's even part of Games Workshop library of like where they sell models through is Forge World. That's where they sell all the big boys. So the Imperium is basically like, hey, if we sacrifice specific worlds to singular uses, we don't really have to worry about things like the environment. Because if you try to worry about the environment on one planet, but also try to like grow food and manufacture like Lehman Russ tanks, for example, on the same planet, those are basically conflicting interests in the eyes of the Imperium. So they basically take all of this and segment the uses. So every planet is ideally going to serve one singular service, excuse me. So before the events of Space Marine 1, where Titus discovers his resistance to the warp, we actually see this happen in some of his backstory as well. As a part of another squad, he encounters a Chaos Sorcerer that deletes his entire squad, but fails to kill Titus. This minion of the Ruinous Powers is defeated, but also deals Titus a mortal blow. He is like on his deathbed. And his chapter's like, well, we're going to keep him here. We're going to do everything we can. But they're like, hey, we're pretty sure you're going to die. Titus actually survives the encounter and surprises his apothecaries. They're like, you were supposed to be dead. First of all, you didn't survive. You survived all the warp taint, which, again, rose a lot of suspicions. Thank you. And you also survived a mortal wound. How did you really do that? So everyone's suspicious of him, and they kind of just move on. They don't really censure him in any way, but they're like, hey, man, kind of sus, kind of suspicious. Anyways, we have more missions that need done, so here we go. They then go to a campaign on Beta Arcturus. So the Ultramarines are fighting the Eldar, and specifically the Ultramarines' second company captain, Trajan, slew the autarch of the Bealtan. So I know, I just said a bunch of different words, so let me back up a step here, guys. Beta Arcturus is a planet. Trajan is just the name of the guy. So again, it's just the Ultramarine second company commander in this instance,
but not the
chapter master,
not Trajan Valoris, who is a custody.
Yes, different person, same name. So keep that in mind. If you heard,
that's not allowed.
If you heard Eldar, that's a race of space elves, essentially.
Space elves, yep.
And a faction of those space elves is called the Bealtan or Beltan. I'm actually not sure how you pronounce that. I pronounce it Biel-Tan.
I think it's Biel-Tan.
So keep in mind, that's where we're going with this. And then an autarch is the leader of that faction, of that specific like band of Eldar. So basically, not the good guy, sorry, let me rephrase that. The Ultramarine captain kills the Eldar captain. That is essentially what's happening here. So stuff is going down. The Ultramarines are fighting hard and pushing the Eldar back. But the Eldar, because they lost their leader, are now like, okay, we're taking the gloves off. We're going guerrilla tactics. So in a spiteful move, the Eldar take an Ultramarine captive, the name of which we know is Leandros, a battle brother actually of Titus, who's a friend of his, and they take him away. They're basically like, hey.
That's who they capture?
Yes.
Leandros, no.
Yeah. They basically are like, hey, we're going to take captives now, so come and get us. And so they have all of this fun stuff to deal with now.
So at this point, Trajan takes his squad on a rescue mission and orders Titus to remain. Not really sure if this is because, like, hey, you're wounded still, but he's
not wounded at this point.
Okay, so he's totally recovered. And it was actually in this piece of fortune for Titus and misfortune for his brothers that the Eldar used this captive to draw the squad of Ultramarines into a trap and actually slew the second company captain. Field promotion. Titus then
that's how promotions work in the Imperium. They're like, hey, your boss died, you're the new boss.
They're like, damn, that was crazy. You got a beating heart.
Pretty much.
Titus then led a counterattack to retrieve Leandros and the body of Trajan. It was these actions that then awarded him the title of second company captain. Titus goes on to accumulate another 150 years of service with the Second Company, and then gilded by victories against the enemies of the Emperor. Titus was the commander of Second for 10 years before the events of Space Marine 1.
So he has quite the service record. Another piece of lore for you guys is the reason it's so important that Space Marines recover each other's bodies is because they contain modified organs, which all together are referred to as the gene seed. There's a lot of different parts of them, but there's a specific organ that they need to take from dead Space Marines called the gene seed. I think it's the progenitor gland that they specifically need to get out. Can you offer any corrections on that?
Can I? So the apothecary has a tool called an arthesium. You don't need to remember that word. It's not important. It's a drill. It is a massive drill that basically just like sinks into the body of a Space Marine, and just its only purpose is to extract this organ. And that is their equivalent of a battlefield medic. They're like, brother, your body is dead. Well, we'll just harvest your organs. Be like, no, I'm still all Space Marines are organ donors.
Indeed.
Every last one of them.
It's mandatory. That's how they stay alive.
It's mandatory. That's how the chapter stays alive. Although out of all of the chapters, the Ultramarines probably have no problem with like stocks of gene seed. Like there are some other chapters like the Raven Guard, for example, who are almost decimated in the Horus Heresy, and their recruitment numbers probably really struggle. Ultramarines, probably not so much. It's like what, the 500 worlds of Ultramar by the end of the Heresy, it was like 498.
Yeah, they're doing pretty fine.
They're doing all right.
Absolutely. So coming up next, you posed an interesting question that we'll actually get to some more answers later in the episode. But between Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2, Titus gets demoted. Like, so if you guys don't know, the part of the rank part of the signifiers of Space Marine ranks is service studs, which are not tattoos, but would you call them piercings? Like, it kind of looks like somebody just puts the end of a bolt like right into their head, and they get their studs on their forehead.
They are massive dermal piercings in your forehead.
Yikers. That's so metal. I love it.
Literally and figuratively, it is very metal.
Yes. So the reasoning Titus gets demoted, and we'll go into the backstory about this here in just a little bit, because we're going to actually talk about specifically what happens between games 1 and 2 here in just a sec. But he gets demoted, and the TLDR is they didn't want to disrupt the current leadership. but he does get assigned with his previous company. So in Ultramarines 1 and 2, he is serving the same company of Ultramarines, which is the second. So that is a good piece of knowledge to know. Now, we're going to specifically go into what happens between games 1 and 2. So we're going to talk timeline here for just a second. Game 1 happens, they go through. So Titus gets snagged at the end of Space Marine 1 for suspicion of heresy. An entire century goes by. 100 years. So Titus is gone for so long. And I wrote this in like alternating upper and lowercase. And somehow he returns.
Somehow Palpatine has returned.
He does, however, when he comes back, he gets to basically go through the Rubicon Primaris, and he does get his Primaris upgrade. So in the second game, you are using Titus, Lieutenant Titus at this point, as a Primaris Marine. So just to know. So Titus gets replaced by Cato Sicarius, who ends up becoming the new commander of the second. Titus undergoes a ton of physical and psychic interrogations from the Inquisition. Excuse me.
Honestly, I'm shocked they didn't just straight up kill him.
So the reason he doesn't die is kind of terrible. So the reason he gets tortured so much is because of Inquisitor Thrax. So Inquisitor Thrax hates Space Marines. So which would kind of lead you to believe that you're like, yeah, why wouldn't he just kill him, right?
Yeah,
he wanted to torture them. So when Titus was found, he was in stasis because Thrax would wake these Space Marines up. Titus was not the only one. He would torture them and then put them back in stasis so that they could heal and he could torture them again. Grimdark! So that's what we're dealing with. So what's really ironic about this is Thrax, because he's so suspicious of all these Marines in his care, because he's like, every single one of you is tainted by chaos, but it's my job to find out how. That is like his entire life purpose. He then goes on a mission with the Grey Knights and gets possessed himself.
Oh my gosh.
If you don't know, the Grey Knights are a chapter of Space Marines originally founded by Malcador the Sigillite to hunt down heretics and basically to completely wipe out Warp Taint.
Yeah.
So Grey Knights are so good at this that not a single one of them has fallen to chaos. That is kind of the current state of lore, and I think they're probably going to keep it that way. That would be really lame if they're like, oh, we hit a Grey Knight, fell to chaos. It's like, no, they would literally die before they fell to chaos. Because the Grey Knights have such a low tolerance of chaos and its possession, they basically gank him immediately. They're like, oh, you're tainted? Blow! They just like absolutely destroy him. So Grey Knights don't give a fuck about the taint of chaos. So they basically saw it. They're like, hey, this is tainted. We need to stamp it out. We did our job. Fantastic.
Yeah. Insert the GIF from the Astartes short film where the one Inquisitor, like his face lights up and the guy just punches him and the other Marines just
yeah, he basically gets annihilated. So then we get to this logistical issue. There is now an issue with all of these Space Marines who are in stasis, and Thrax is nowhere to be seen because he's dead now. So another Inquisitor discovers Titus and basically finds all of these Space Marines. It's actually considered to be a thing of good fortune that this Inquisitor saw and actually had mercy on these Space Marines, because a normal story arc might say the Inquisitors wanted to cover this up because he was not supposed to be torturing Space Marines. This was super illegal. Like, he was doing this by his own power, not sanctioned by anybody else. And it was actually thought that this new Inquisitor would be like, hey, I'm actually going to kill all these Space Marines because that's going to cover everything up. She doesn't. She lets them all live, opens them back up, and basically says, hey, it is your job to continue your service to the Imperium. So Titus actually comes back. This is part of that 100 years between games 1 and 2. So he's not just in stasis the whole time. He actually goes into service of the Black Templars. Also really interesting about this, because he's been like spirited away from his original chapter, he is on the wrong side of the galaxy and does not know Guilliman has returned, which is really sad. What we see next is, here's a little bit of background info, guys, is when Cadia fell, If you guys don't know about Cadia, it's basically a planet that multiple different factions fought over for a ton of time.
Cadia stands.
Yeah, Cadia stands. It's basically just a running joke. But Abaddon the Despoiler constantly is launching Black Crusades, or essentially just attacks on this planet. He's constantly trying to kill and destroy Cadia. He eventually destroys the entire planet. We're not talking like kills all the inhabitants on it. Like he actually breaks the planet. So when this happens, this actually opens up a warp rift and splits the galaxy in half. If you've read anything about the Horus Heresy, you're probably having flashbacks right now where the Imperium could barely talk to each other because the forces of chaos were like, hey, we're actually going to open up a huge warp storm across the galaxy and we're going to cut everybody off from each other so that way the heresy can flourish. That's essentially what's happens. This is the same thing. Enough warp activity has gone on that the Chaos Gods are like, oh, yes, we're going to divide the planet. So this whole time, Titus is serving the the Black Templars, unbeknownst that his leader is back, and he does eventually get reunited with the Ultramarines. So that's essentially what has happened between games 1 and 2.
So one of the other questions we wanted to talk about is if you actually notice, everything about the graphics in Space Marine 2 is more detailed. There's more detail on his armor, but there's one specific detail that I actually want to point out on Titus's armor that is very interesting and does not have its roots in Ultramarine lore, which is the fact that his weapon is chained to his hand. So this is actually a tradition that dates all the way back to the Great Crusade, before the days of the Horus Heresy. Before the legions were ripped into chapters, and before the Imperium was ripped in half by the worst civil war the galaxy would ever see, those of the different legions would learn fellowship and train and fight together. No fights were more famous than the pits of the World Eaters. So, raised on in the gladiatorial pits of Nuceria, Angron, who is the Primarch of the World Eaters, and later who becomes a demon Primarch of Khorne, he's now a chaos bad guy, he grew his legions out of these gladiatorial pits, and the pit fighters of the World Eaters would chain their weapons to their hands so that they wouldn't lose them in the pits. And you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with an Ultramarine? It's sort of like how many degrees away are you separated from Kevin Bacon? In this case, it's how many degrees of separation is Titus from chaos?
Oh dear.
Oh dear. It's not that menacing though. So when the World Eaters and the gladiators of Nuceria, including Angron, were rescued and brought back into the Imperium by the Emperor, the warriors of the Red Angels continued fighting in their own version of gladiator pits amongst themselves as a source of training. They are considered to be some of the best melee fighters in all of the legions, so certain Marines from other legions would actually come to the World Eaters to train with them. One such Marine was known as Sigismund. Run out of breath. Sigismund was the first captain of the Imperial Fist's first company. He was the captain of the first company.
Yep.
Yeah, I got there eventually. AKA the Black Templars. These are the dudes that carried away Titus at the end of the first game in chains. So after the Imperial Fist Legion was split into chapters, the Black Templars would become their own chapter, but they kept this tradition because Sigismund learned to fight in the arenas, and he picked up the tradition of chaining his weapon to his hand, and he taught his fighters to chain their weapons to their hand. So it's reasonable to assume that Titus's time with the Black Templars, he also learned to chain his weapon to his hand. Now, this is probably a tactical decision because, like, hey, you're not going to lose your weapon. That's the whole reason they do it. It's like you can't lose your sword if your sword is now attached to your arm, unless you lose your arm, which is a real risk. But
at that point, you're probably going to die anyway. So,
yeah, totally. But also, it's probably a sign of respect that now Captain Titus has potentially the favor of the Black Templars to say, I have gone through your gauntlet and I have passed.
I'm surprised in this entire thing that he stays loyal to the Imperium, because it's one of the Inquisitor's like loyal subjects who tortures him for no reason.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'll still serve. That's fine. And he ends up serving with the guys that originally jailed him. Titus is too good to be an Imperial. He's way too, like, the Imperium does not deserve Titus because they're kind of terrible. So that's kind of where we leave off, guys. And I like that. How many degrees away from Kevin Bacon are you separated from? Because my brain is now like, so if you go to Angron, to the World Eaters to Sigismund to the Imperial Fists, the Imperial Fist to Black Templars to Titus. So that's like, what, 5-6 degrees of separation?
Something like that.
From Titus to a Demon Primarch, you're like, how are these connected? And you're like, actually, let me tell you how. So,
which is funny because that many degrees of separation from a Demon Primarch and the Inquisition, who is not known for their mercy. See Exhibit A of why Titus ended up in a test tube in the first place. Like, they would have been just like, all right, well, we have to kill you now. I mean, good thing the Grey Knights didn't hear about it, because they probably would have just ganked the entire Imperial Fists Legion, be like, you guys trained with the World Eaters, like, you can't be trusted. But
enough.
There was the whole like defense of Terra thing, so I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say they did kind of prove themselves to be like, kind of loyal, because they set up the fortifications of Terra.
Yeah.
Sigismund and Rogel Doran were some of the most staunch defenders of Terra, and the Emperor, they were kind of important. So, and the Black Templars have been historically very devout to the Imperium.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I just said the wrong word. I was thinking Star Wars there for a second.
Same diff.
So keep in mind, guys, the Black Templars look like old-fashioned crusaders. So
yeah,
you get a lot of like religious zealotry from them. So if they saw
it's
Titus,
turned up to 11.
Yeah. So if they saw Titus and they were like, hey, he's cool with us, he goes back to the relatively tame Ultramarines, and they're probably thinking, yeah, he's clear. He's good to go. Happy to have you back. Now, Andrew, I don't know if you know this. I did not find an answer to this. Did we ever find out like where Titus gets his resistance to the warp? Because he's not a librarian, right?
No, we have no idea. No, yeah, he does not have the ability to actively touch the warp, but when the warp acts upon Titus, he's completely immune. He's completely immune. And we don't know why. We don't even know if, like, we'll find out in the second game. However, it's kind of highly hinted that we will find out, considering the Thousand Sons are a part of, like, they're going to be like the more elite versions of, like, the first game you fight two factions, the second game you fight two factions. It'd be sweet if like a third faction came into play. And
oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
But the Thousand Sons are, out of all of Chaos, all of the Chaos Space Marines, who most of them are now touched by the warp, the Thousand Sons are the most touched by the warp. There's probably a better way to say that, but they're all sorcerers. There was 100% of them are psychers.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So if someone is going to explain to Titus, hey, this is where it came from, it's going to be them.
Yeah. Guys, we have just gone over a ton of different things for Titus. Lieutenant Titus, maybe soon to be captain again. I don't know, but lots of fun stuff. Now, we're going to go into... Andrew, do you have anything... I should ask first. Do you have anything to add before we go into some nerddom news?
Nah, brah.
Sweet. Andrew, go ahead and lead us off with our first point.
So the Pariah Nexus chapter approved is going to be coming out soon in the next few weeks to replace the Leviathan rule set. So expect a lot of things to start to change in match play for Warhammer 40k 10th edition. We'll try to do our best to keep up with the rules, but it's really difficult without actually purchasing all of like the codexes. And like, just straight up, Nathan and I are not going to buy codexes for armies that we don't play. I didn't even buy a codex for the army that I do play, which is Dark Angels, because they massacred my boys, first off. They did bad things to them, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm switching teams now. That is exactly how that went down. I took my Imperial Knights, and I'm like, okay, well, now they're going to be covered in blood, and they're now Chaos Knights. So
yeah. We also have some news about Star Wars and a lot of gaming news to cover as well, guys. So Star Wars news, just really quick. We did get some things that finally happened this last month that we've been waiting for a while. So we've covered multiple different times on different episodes, the Acolyte and what we are expecting, like things talking about the High Republic, which is the era this is set into. And so far, as of the time of this recording, the first 3 episodes are out. We are not going to do a review on that yet, but we will do a complete season 1 review later. Not at this time. I don't think we're going to break it apart because we have so much Warhammer stuff that we want to go through. So we're going to stick to just like one season at a time, unless we like really, really need to break things down. But we'll keep you guys posted on that. So things are always in change, always in flux. So we're going to cover that at a later date. Andrew, you saw the Game Pass reveal, correct?
I saw the picture they put out at the end.
So I would love to go over these here because I have an article over on GameRant.com that has a lot of different fun notes for this. So you guys have probably seen it's a like basically a 5x6 grid of all of the different Xbox games showcase titles that are coming out starting in 2024. So I want to go through these really, really quick here, guys. So that way we can just like keep you guys all up to date. So I'm going to go through these in order with their release dates. Sound good? All right. So the first game we're going to see is Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn. That is coming out July 18th, 2024. We are getting Age of Mythology Retold September 4th, 2024. Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, September 5th, 2024, so a day after. Then we're going to get Call of Duty Black Ops 6 this year, October 25th. Flight Simulator 2024 is coming out November 19th.
Is the new Black Ops going to have zombies?
It should, yes.
Good.
In the pictures I have seen, there are zombies in the thumbnails, so we are going to be seeing that.
Yay.
We also are getting an Indiana Jones game. So this is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This is coming out in 2024. Does not have a specific release date, but it is in 2024. I thought you were going to say something, and I realized you were just humming the Indiana Jones song, so that's fine. We're also going to get Avowed that is going to come out in 2024 as well. I've never played Avowed before. I don't know if that's a standalone game. I don't even know if it's part of another series, but here we are. We are also getting a lot of different games that are going to be coming out in 2025. So we've got Winter Burrow, hopefully coming out in early 2025. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 coming out in 2025. Again, never heard of that before. South of Midnight 2025. Most of these, actually, I should say, let me preface this so you guys don't have to hear me say the same thing over and over again, is the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games are all coming out in 2025, and I don't know when. There's not an explicit date. So that includes what we just mentioned: Winter Burrow, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, South of Midnight, Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, Fable, which is coming out in 2025, and we will be streaming that. That will be happening, absolutely. Mixtape, Atomfall, and another game I really want to stream, Doom: The Dark Ages. Heavy metal demon slaying intensifies.
Doing the Lord's work revs a chainsaw.
100%. Now, I'm a little salty at this next piece of news because we have 3 games on here that are actually fairly big titles and they don't have a release date. So the first one is Perfect Dark. If you guys are familiar with the Perfect Dark franchise, this is not a franchise that we have dug into a ton. I don't know if you've played any of these games, Andrew.
Nope.
I have not. But Perfect Dark is actually a really important franchise to Xbox as a franchise, because we have gotten so many different Perfect Dark games, like starting in the early 2000s, like Perfect Dark Zero. I think it's Perfect Dark Zero came out like shortly after Halo Combat Evolved. So there's a lot of history with the Perfect Dark series.
And I think one of the iterations of Perfect Dark came out with the launch of the 360.
Yes. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of was Perfect Dark Zero. Don't quote me on all that, guys, because again, it's a franchise that I know has been around for a while, but I'm not super well versed in its specific history, so I do apologize about that. Another one, which I think we're actually going to be pretty excited about because we've played these games quite a bit with us in our squad, is State of Decay 3.
Yay.
I don't know about you, but this game is so much fun. This franchise is a
so
blast,
good.
and it kind of makes me want to pee my pants a little bit every time I play because
It's a horror zombie survival game that will have you laughing and screaming with your friends. Like it's one of the games that it's one of the most fun games to have a LAN party with. Like you get three friends, get your consoles into the same room, turn the lights out, and play State of Decay. I promise you guys are going to have such a blast. They're so fun. And like the open-endedness of the game allows for just like a whole bunch of stuff. And it's it's State of Decay, honestly, I think is probably one of the best zombie games out there.
and it's wild. It
It's
gets
so cool.
It gets intense, super, super fun. Fighting Juggernauts, oh my gosh. I can't tell you how
Oh
many
my
times I've
gosh.
screamed into my microphone because a Juggernaut is running at me.
I can tell you how many times.
The next game title we have, and I think this is probably one of the games I am most excited about
100%.
that does not have a release date, is Gears of War E-Day.
Yes. Oh.
So Gears of War is coming out with its first, or I guess there's Gears of War Judgment Day, which is a little bit of a prequel, but not really. But we are getting a full series prequel in Gears of War Emergence Day. This is the next installment in the Gears of War series. It's featuring young Phoenix and young Dom.
Oh, I know.
And I got the feels. Dom. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
For those of you who have really played through the Gears franchise, it almost has felt like a little bit of a gut punch. You're like, oh my gosh, he's back. And like Gears 1 was the most, I would actually classify it as a horror shooter because it had some freaky parts in it. It wasn't games like Fear or even BioShock, I would say was scarier than Gears, but there was definitely some parts where like the giant spiders would come out of the ground, or if you stepped in the shadows, the krill would eat you. It's like that's a little freaky.
Oh yeah.
So I'm hoping we really kind of go back to that vibe of spook the hell out of people. I'm really excited to see how they're gonna manage a new horde mode when their technology level is going backwards.
Yeah, that's gonna be very interesting.
So it might be something like it, not really that their technology is going backwards, but this is where their technology was before E-Day, because humanity is basically pushed to the brink of extinction in 1, 2, 3, and then doesn't start to get really back up on its feet until 4 and 5.
Some other games that we didn't cover in the showcase, guys, that I don't have information on at this time, but we're hoping to get more. And I'll just run through these really quick. So other games that were showed were, this picture is like super small. I do apologize about that. We have Diablo 4, which is Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred.
Oh, so a DLC. Okay.
Yes. Some of these are going to be DLC of games you already know. World of Warcraft, The War Within. Actually kind of excited about that.
Also DLC. Nerd.
Yes. Dragon Age The Veilguard, Assassin's Creed Shadows, not a series we play, but I know a lot of people do. The next one is a Starfield expansion called Shattered Space. We have another DLC for the Elder Scrolls Online called The Gold Road. We have Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, so that's going to be cool. We have an additional DLC for Fallout 76 called Skyline Valley, a game or potentially DLC, not familiar with this title, but Life is Strange Double Exposure. And then the showcase picture has just a title that says Sea of Thieves. It doesn't have an extra title on it, so I don't know if that's DLC or if it's a next installment. I don't have any more information at this time.
Sea of Thieves is a really fun game.
It is. And the giant sea monsters are terrifying. So that's always fun.
Oh my gosh, dude. You can't see, but my toes are a-curling. I have just a little bit of thalassophobia in the fact that the ocean is freaking terrifying, and that's where all the monsters live.
Oh yeah.
That is my real opinion.
The last two games on the showcase that I don't think I've mentioned so far are Fragpunk and Mecha Break. So more to come about a lot of these titles. We won't be able to cover all of these, but there's definitely going to be a lot of games that we stream from these titles. Guys, please make sure to follow us on Twitch and TikTok, because we do stream live to those platforms.
Yep.
And that way you can stay up with us, because we can't cover all of the content we want to on the podcast. There is not enough time, but we do cover a ton of extra content over on our streams multiple times a week, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. So not only can you guys catch us on our podcast, but you guys can catch us over there multiple times as well.
It is the fastest, easiest way to interact with us. And it's how you enter for our lightsaber giveaway over on Twitch, because subs, bit donations get you tickets into the drawing. And then if you buy stuff off of our Etsy page, you get 2 tickets. So,
which, for example, if you're a Twitch streamer and you are excited about Space Marine 2, guys, we have Warhammer emotes on our Etsy page. They are available for immediate download. We actually just had some people buy some the other day, which I was super excited about.
Because you worked hard on those.
I did. It took a very long time to do, and I'm actually coming out with more Warhammer creative stuff as well. We do a little bit of graphic design over here, just a tiny bit. Most of it is to benefit ourselves, but we do sell some of those assets as well. So if you want to get your hand on some of those assets, they're available for immediate download over on Etsy.
Cheap.
And they do enter you into the the lightsaber giveaway, but you have to fill out the Google Doc, or the Google form, It is an opt-in process. We do not automatically opt you into that. So you have to say, I want to do this. I want to enter the giveaway.
Yes, because you do have to give us a little bit of information, because we have to be able to contact you and make sure that you are indeed a real person.
Because we're not giving our lightsaber to a bot.
Because we are going to ship a real lightsaber to a real person.
With a real address on this very round earth of ours.
Hopefully that person is in the United States, because then that means shipping is a lot cheaper. But we have shipped to the UK and Canada.
We have done it. So that's our lightsaber giveaway, guys. You can also support us on Patreon as well. If you guys support us on there, it does give you access to the Discord server, and our Discord server gets all of the most up-to-date information on what's going on behind the scenes. We have a ton of fun channels that we talk about all sorts of different stuff. And I think most importantly, the Discord server, those on there are our first line of sounding board advice. We're like, hey guys, we have this idea of things we want to do. What do you guys think? Because our patrons are our most important people. Like, those are the people's opinion we take into consideration first, because you guys have paid to be there. You guys value us enough you guys have wanted to put value into the podcast, and we want that value to be reciprocated. So we really, really value your input over there. So please support us on Patreon. This is your plug. Please do it, guys. That helps us out so much. And even just 1 month of supporting on Patreon does give you lifetime access to that Discord, along with other benefits as well. So please do that. Do it.
The only other piece of news I have, so fans of tabletop Star Wars, this is actually bad news. The Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars X-Wing and Star Wars Armada, are no longer being actively supported in development. There's going to be no new minis, no new rules. They are discontinuing production. So if you have X-Wing minis or Armada minis, they are not making any more.
Do you still have any of your minis?
No, I don't have any.
Because I don't have any of mine either.
I never bought into X-Wing. I've only ever played it on Tabletop Simulator in recent years.
Wow. So guys, if you guys have models, don't get rid of them. They've basically skyrocketed in value since they're no longer in production. Depending on how you look at it. If there's collectors who still play the game, then yes, your models have a lot of value. If there's nobody that wants them, well, that's a bummer. That also means, man, I wish we had a 3D printer, because I would love to be able to print some models, but that's all right.
Yeah.
That's way far in the future, years in the future, that I hope we get a 3D printer. So guys, thanks for sticking around with us for so long. We are coming up to the end of the episode, so I just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us here at Talk About Tatooine. Every single one of you is fantastic, handsome, beautiful, and probably pretty witty as well. I know all of you guys are pretty great. You're like, oh, he's being a little flirtatious. Yes, I am. Absolutely. I'm being flirtatious. Anyway, so guys, thank you just so much for listening all the way through. If you have listened to me ramble for the last, at least unedited time of 54 minutes, thank you so much for being here. Leave us a comment below the video, guys, in YouTube. That actually really helps, one, boost engagement, and helps us know what you guys want to see. We want to know your thoughts on the episode. If there's something we missed and you're like, hey, you should have included this, we can include that in our next episode. And if you're like, hey, here are some ideas for future episodes, we'd love to share that as well. One thing that we talked about at the beginning of the episode as well is our models. We are Warhammer painters. I'm an Orc player. Andrew is a Space Marine player. If you guys have models that you guys want to show off, we will throw those up onto our Twitter, our Instagram stories, and all of that fun stuff, because we want to share off the hard work that you guys have done as well. So if you guys have any models that you guys want to send us, again, plastic models, I don't care about your people, make sure to shoot us over those in our DMs on one of those social platforms, and we will make sure that gets to you. If you have questions you guys want featured on air, you guys can also shoot us those in the DMs as well. Guys, make sure to like and subscribe so the algorithmic overlords will slice this video into the feeds of other like-minded folks. And until next time, the Emperor protects.